I'm Olivia Solon, I'm the Associate Editor of Wired.co.uk, and I know on the programme it said we were here to talk about incubators, but having had some discussions with my panellists, we've decided not to talk about incubators. I'm getting some kind of nervous looks from the organisers. No, what we're going to talk about shared working spaces and accelerators. Apparently the word incubator is not a popular one because it conjures up images of sick babies and chicks rather than burgeoning businesses. So it's accelerators, so forgive me if I occasionally say the word incubator, I'm sorry for that. But what we're talking about is about providing office space and mentorship to multiple startups, what's that mean, with the same teething problems. This is often but not always accompanied by investment, or at the very least some sort of funneling towards investors. And in the last about 5 years, many of these have cropped up. I'm wondering if that's my mic or not. Okay. A load of these have cropped up, and we've heard a few of them mentioned earlier. We've had, there's an incubator at the ODI, and then there's obviously Level 39, Eric's initiative. But I think at this point it makes sense to introduce our lovely panel, because there's quite a lot of different models that are available for accelerators, incubators, shared working spaces, whatever we're going to call them. So on my left we have Easy Vidra, who's head of Google Campus, or just Campus I think as you refer to
Campus London.
Campus London, I'm sorry. And now this is a large space in Shoreditch that provides shared working and meeting places for startups. Google doesn't actually invest in any of the companies, and it's run not for profit. And you also have lots of Google execs going down to provide kind of mentorship. Next we have Ashley Stockwell, who's the Academy Director at Wyra UK, which is Telefonica's accelerator program. Now they invest in a number of startups. I think you have 16?
19 now.
19 at the moment. And they give them space in this beautiful building in Tottenham Court Road for between 6 and 9 months when it's creeping a little bit, but in return they get access to mentors, training, and Telefonica's customer base, potentially. Next we have Bindi Karia, who runs Microsoft's BizSpark program. Not for much longer, she's about to leave Microsoft for a job that she's just got at Silicon Valley Bank, so congratulations to Bindi for that. But BizSpark gives companies access to Microsoft software. It doesn't actually invest in the companies, but it provides mentorship and training, and a select few are picked for the BizSpark 1 program, where they get more one-on-one contact. But the aim is to create the kind of next generation of Microsoft partners and potential acquisitions. And finally, this is absolutely terrible. Blaine's been a wonderful last-minute stand-in, but I'm going to have to get him to introduce himself, because although we had a lovely long conversation, he's had to stand in at the last minute instead of Stefan Glenzer from White Bear Yard. So I'm sorry, Blaine.
Bethnal Green Ventures. I have a startup in London and work out of the Shoreditch Works space, which is, you know, a co-working space in Shoreditch, as it were. And yeah, just sort of very interested in this sort of thing.
Okay, fantastic. Well, just let's start with my first question, which is, what do the panel think that startups are most in need of when they come to join these sorts of shared working spaces or accelerators? Easy.
Sure. I think that we need to differentiate, sorry to go back to terminology, between accelerator and shared working space. An accelerator is a program. It's a cohort program where a large number of startups ideally apply, the best get selected, and then in most cases, the ones that get selected receive mentorship, a seed investment and support to then go on and raise future investment. Shared working spaces are not a new phenomenon, actually, but they are becoming more and more popular. And that basically is when entrepreneurs, rather than renting a whole office, can join a community by renting a single desk or several desks, either on a permanent basis or having drop-in access. For me, the answer, the thing that those two have in common is community. I think that for early stage startups, it's extremely hard to succeed without having a network of peer support and a wider community that not only shows them what to do, but also what not to do. They learn from each other, and they can make these important connections, or what I call the magic element of startup, which is a serendipity. And to have serendipity, you need to mix with others. You can't do it in your dorm room.
Okay.
I think the other point is in the title, accelerator. So the challenge in some ways is to try and fast track those businesses. So try and give them the tools to develop their business quickly and efficiently, and that can really vary depending on the stage of startup, the age of the team, in terms of what they may require. But ultimately, so it can be very diverse.
Coming at it, we're very virtual, as you know. First thing I'll certainly echo what Easy said is community. Certainly when we get a lot of the startups together in the BizSpark program, really they learn a lot from each other. Being a CEO of a startup is a very lonely place, and actually meeting each other, being part of that community is huge. I think secondly, in our case, a lot of what we do is we actually help with the actual product. So we bring them into our labs, very, very high performance compute, full-on labs. We give them access to our engineers, and we actually help them build their product out, which is actually key, because in the end, how can they launch the business if they don't have a product that's viable and people want to work with, whether it's a business or a consumer. And then the last thing we do is we open doors. I think companies like Microsoft and Telefonica, we have large global relationships with large corporates. And a lot of the time what we do for the startups we work with is we open doors, and we can get that startup's application on the CIO desktop of one of the largest banks in the world. And we've actually done that a few times, where we open doors for our startups to, meet the other innovation teams of other corporates. And it really works. So
I think one of the challenges with that, though, is actually potentially opening up too many doors, such you almost make the entrepreneur a bit snowblind in terms of all those options that just weren't there before they stepped into it.
Yeah, well, it's also about working with corporates and making sure that they're not wasting their time. Yeah. And I think really that's our job, to encourage them to focus in the right direction as well.
Yeah. And I think from the entrepreneurial perspective, it's really, for me, it's about having that cycle. So, I've been through a couple of startups and can share my experiences from there, but never in the sort of running a startup's way. So I'm doing a lot of mentoring sort of on the technical side and sort of product vision side, but at the same time, the office that we share office space with, This Is My Jam, which is one of the really interesting startups in London right now, and downstairs is Makey Lab, and one of the founders of Last.fm is in the building, and that's just the building. There's everyone's close by. Google the campus is close by, and being able to share in that sort of everyone is learning from everyone else is so important.
Now, people tend to give big corporates like Google, Telefonica, Microsoft a lot of credit for supporting the startup ecosystem. But aren't you just creating a kind of elaborate recruitment scheme for the best engineering talent?
I don't allow Google recruiters on campus unless they're there to help startups recruit. This is not the point, and we have to really understand. Google and I think other big corporates are interested in having a healthy ecosystem. And for that, if a big company, like one of these three companies, does really well in a single year, they may hire 1% more people. A startup will double in pace, in size, every so often. It will continue doubling and doubling and doubling. And we want to create more of that. So it's not about poaching the best engineers out of startups. It's about helping startups grow to have a healthy ecosystem.
Would Bindi and Stefan actually agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I coming from a background where I've worked for Virgin for about 20 years, working for one of the most well-known entrepreneurs, I can genuinely say that Telefonica are interested in supporting the startup ecosystem and genuinely wanting to mentor and create a series of startups. They've invested in 180 startup businesses so far.
But what happens if the startups go tits up? Would you then think about recruiting the engineering talent?
Well,
I mean, some of the startups will go tits up. I think there's no question.
It's no question.
There is no question. I mean, some of them will fail and some of them will succeed, and that's the sort of gamble that Telefonica and Google and Microsoft are taking. But ultimately, they want to see successful businesses, that if they, you know, there is a side benefit where they may either be able to take on great staff ultimately if a business fails, or ultimately try and buy the startup and incorporate it back into O2 or Telefonica in our case. And that's, again, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, and I would disagree as well, Olivia. I think the way we come at it with Microsoft is our lifeblood is our partners. And you know, for example, in the United Kingdom, we have 30,000 partners responsible for, you know, over 90% of our revenue worldwide. And so actually what we're doing with the BizSpark program is creating the future generation of partners that will work alongside Microsoft. I think secondly, and you know, Google and Telefonica, I think this is probably the case for you guys as well, it's a platform play. We want to encourage innovation on our platform, and the only way we can do that is with young, nimble startups who can out-innovate the big companies and can turn on a dime every single time. So it really is about fostering innovation and sharing that innovation, and it is about platform as well.
Although Campus, you welcome people working across all platforms, don't you? It's not exclusively Google, people working
we do too as well.
You do as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Usually, the way that I describe Campus is a little bit of a weird one, because the first question I get is like, why is Google doing Campus? What's in it for Google? Usually, the way that I describe Campus is that if there was an equivalent between real estate and software, Campus would be an open source building in the sense that I totally agree. It's a platform play, and for us, the platform is Campus, and working with multiple partners, some of them are in the audience today, and with the startup community, we power the ecosystem. So I don't necessarily care if the startup is developing on iOS or on .NET or on Google. Of course, if they're using a Google platform, I can probably help them more because the people that are creating these systems are coming to Campus every Friday to mentor them.
Yeah, and if I may, you know, there's actually 3 of the 4 tenants of Campus are also partnering with BizSpark. I see a couple of the partners here. And actually, there's a fair number of BizSpark startups in Campus, so I hang out with Easy once in a while.
That's true.
And I think, you know, I think the ecosystem
it's
argument
all about
is,
the community
it really
and ecosystem.
Is. I mean,
Absolutely.
London is it's still quite young and growing quite a lot. And I think, you know, between Campus or GovUK, I think is a really interesting sort of place where lots of people, as Russell was talking about earlier, are really, you know, cutting their teeth, and they're going to go out and create that next generation of startups, and that, you know, that ecosystem is so important to foster right now. So.
Now, my next question's mainly for Bindi and Ashley, but both of your companies are making investments from a kind of strategic point of view. I guess in the case of Wayra, you're investing in lots of mobile companies, sort of like an outsourced, possibly an outsourced like R&D unit in a way. And I guess the question is, how easy is it to plug in these nimble startups that have, you know, turned things around very quickly into the slightly more sluggish product pipeline of a massive international corporation?
I suppose there are a couple of things there. One is that we are making the investment in tech companies generally, so it's not just about mobile, and they don't have to have any association or link with what O2 or Telefonica are doing. But clearly there is an opportunity to plug in to the sort of 22 million O2 customers in the UK and the wider set of business units, if that's appropriate. And actually that works on both levels. So there are small entrepreneurial startups who get access to a network and a set of business units that they would never probably even be able to get through the front door of in our case. And the second thing is actually it helps force O2 and Telefonica to get their shit together and start operating in a quicker way than they would normally do. So I think there is a benefit of both sides on that.
Yeah, if I can say, you know, I've been running this program almost 5 years, and my job is as internal as it is external. So I get to know the product groups, I know what they're looking to buy, build, or partner with. I find the startups that can engage with that ecosystem, so I need to know what's going on internally. I think secondly, it's about coaching the startups that work with us that do want to engage with different parts of the business, how to effectively work with us. So there are times where I've actually said to the startup, you know what, this is going to take you a long time. You're going to waste a lot of time and a lot of money trying to work with us. You're better off going elsewhere. But equally, When I know there's something the startup is doing that's going to impact the scorecard or the metrics of someone internally, then it's a very easy connection. So what I would say is it's taken me a few years, but now it's a lot easier to connect startups to people internally at Microsoft. They're much, much more open to it than they were when we launched the program 4.5 years ago. So I think it's a journey, and it's definitely in the right direction.
It may be worth mentioning that there's another model. Usually corporate venture capital is done for strategic purposes, for integration, or for finding that those synergies that the big company has with the small company. Google Ventures, for example, operates on a different level. They are actually a financial investor, so they're not looking for those integrations. They're looking to make the maximum return on the investment, which is another way where corporate venture capital is shifting these days.
I'd argue that there's a lot of experience now that's come out of sort of, I'll point to Flickr at Yahoo and sort of as maybe the harbinger for all of these acquisitions that went very wrong, that we'll just point the Yahoo homepage at you and you'll have all the users. It doesn't quite work that way, and I think there's a lot more experience with that nowadays.
Yeah, and actually I'll give one example is, obviously with our Skype acquisition, and we've killed Messenger, and we're pushing all of our 400 million Messenger users to Skype, which it's brilliant. The startup's teaching us. I'm seeing more and more examples of that where we're actually learning from the innovations of smaller startups. And sometimes that leads to acquisition, but a lot of times it actually just leads to great dialogues and learnings. So, another good example is our cloud team in Redmond learn a heck of a lot from the startups who continually try to break the platform. So we're actually getting just as much from engaging with them as they are with us. We open doors for them and they open doors for us. So it's actually quite a nice symbiotic relationship that I'm seeing.
Yeah. Is there a danger that startups can become too dependent on these accelerators, or the kind of, if we're talking about the spaces with their well-stocked Smeg fridges filled with beer, their ping pong tables, their coffee machines, or whatever we heard about earlier. Is this a problem?
I'll take a crack at it. I think that at this stage of the ecosystem in London, we need more of it. Actually, what the accelerators provide, and co-working spaces as well to some extent, is let's take accelerators first. They provide validation. Basically, someone else said that your idea is good enough to be selected, and then they give you a little bit of investment to have a chance. And more we're seeing these accelerators developing in vertical areas, right? Like B2B, or maybe it's connected devices, maybe it's just mobile. So I think that there's room for more of this kind of support, because what it gives essentially is a validated pipeline of companies, hungry companies, that then would go and raise venture capital more easily and have a higher chance of success. Where it comes to where they are destroying value potentially is when there's inefficient markets where there's lots of maybe subsidies or free money going around, and then you have every two developers developing a cat application, pictures of funny cats, essentially end up spending 2 years working on something that has no consequence because it's easy to get money. So I think as long as we're solving real problems, and hey, Stefan.
Hey.
As long as we're solving real problems.
About the traffic? No.
Take the tube like the rest of us. As long as we're solving real problems and really building businesses rather than lifestyle businesses, I think that accelerators and these sort of models have room, and have even there's more room for them to grow.
I think one of the things that an accelerator will do is will start splitting those teams that have a great idea but are just a team versus entrepreneurs, and I think we see that in Wira, and you could argue that actually that the teams that are just teams with a great idea are relaxing because they've got the fridges and the ping pong table. Actually, what it is that they're actually not the true entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs will break down barriers, they will just get stuff done regardless of what's in their way. And that's the really exciting thing about getting involved in an accelerator, because you can see those and then you can start pushing and helping those entrepreneurs go forward.
If you can't get a desk, if you can't sort out a desk, your company has bigger problems than...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I can say, certainly a program the size of BizSpark, I mean, here in the UK, we have 3,400 companies that have signed up to the program. So I do see all levels. I do see a lot of interesting lifestyle businesses. But actually, by implementing programs such as BizSpark Plus and BizSpark One, we're seeing the true, entrepreneurs, as Ashley described, come out. And typically they're already in the incubators, they're already being invested in by the White Bear Yards or other VCs. So actually, I do see it that way as well.
Okay. I want to take this opportunity to welcome Stefan Glenzer from White Bear Yard. Thanks for turning up, Stefan.
Thanks, Olivia.
Might as well start with a question for you then. It's one thing supporting startups through this kind of very early stages, but what happens when they fly the nest? Like, what are you doing to help them secure that next round of funding?
Eventually, it's all about the entrepreneur. It's either one entrepreneur or it's the entrepreneurial team. All we do, whether you call this incubator, accelerator, early stage, VC, investor, angel, whatever, is actually supporting that. And everything is down to the capability of the entrepreneur. I think, looking at the learnings of Y Combinator, looking at Dropbox and Airbnb and all these successes, they all started within the Y Combinator accelerator. What we see, there's a reason why we started White Bear Yard 3 years ago, because we thought it's actually great to have an office without a single door, 10 to 12 teams in there, and they can hustle and bustle around and learn from each other. And I think it's amazing. It's good.
Yeah, it's absolutely education. I mean, the community learning, and we saw some slides earlier on. I think it was the different stages of education that we were looking at, and it's all part of this ongoing process, and I think that's absolutely right.
So do we think there are enough of these incubators or accelerator programs, shared working spaces? I know they're all ever so slightly different, but are there enough in London? I'm going to start with Bindi.
Actually, I'm going to turn the question around and ask, are there enough enough mentors for these incubators around London? Because there are a lot. And I'm zipping around between all of these guys, in terms of being, and plus Seed Camp, Central Working, the IW, see a few of them in the audience. And my question is, actually, are there enough mentors around for all of these startups in a lot of these accelerators and incubators in London?
Okay. Anyone else?
I mean, I would always say that based on the fact that for the 19 teams that we've had just under 1,500 applications, so there is clearly a demand. I think to Bindi's point, we need to make sure we just, that London doesn't open up a load without getting the support, whether it's mentors, guest speakers, board advisors, and all those things that actually make the thing work. But there is plenty of room for more accelerators in London.
I agree with Ashley. I think that London is experiencing incredible momentum right now. I think that we have all the fundamentals that we need to make London one of the best startup hubs in the world. And I think that there was some rankings published today that show that #1 is San Francisco and #2 is Tel Aviv. So I used to live in San Francisco before I moved to London, and I grew up in Tel Aviv. And I can tell you that here we have all the ingredients. We have access to talent with some of the best universities in the world based in this country. 3 of the top 10, some of them are in London. Have access to capital, although there's some gaps in different stages of capital. But now, we're now in the city, or we're now in Canary Wharf. But campus is based next to the city, and there's more concentration of wealth in 1 square mile than there is in the rest of the continent. So it's just about repurposing some of the capital. And finally, I think that Europe was known as the copycat center, where we used to take ideas from the States and copy them. And I think that that's changing. I think that that British and European entrepreneurs in general are becoming more and more original and more daring, and we're seeing some cool stuff coming out of London, out of Berlin, etc. So I think that there's room for more. When it's completely saturated, then we should have another conference and talk about that.
I think a mentor is just someone with experience, confidence, and a sense of investment in their community. And as there are more successful startups or more people that have built companies or tried to, you'll have more mentors in London. And I certainly see a lot of my peers certainly getting out there and doing that, because it's better for all of us. In the same way that for Google and Microsoft to have a healthy startup ecosystem, it's the same thing for startups. It's really good to have other startups around. It's a very lonely thing if there aren't. So I think we're all in this.
What are the
if I may, my 2 cents to that one, we should just be a bit more ambitious. We are today, 2012, for the first time global leading in 2 categories digitally. One is music. One should not forget. It's pretty much from the good old Kazaa days to today's Spotify and Songkick and others. This is a global leading segment in music, and the second category is very likely to be games with Angry Birds and others. So we have proven that we can create global category leaders in digital out of Europe. And we should just stop with this bashing. I always thought, I'm German, as you can obviously all hear by my accent, but in Germany we tend to be, we are not good enough and so on. And then I moved to London 12 years ago, finally getting all the clearance and wisdom from the Anglo-Saxon crowd. And now I'm learning that you Brits are better than we Germans, but nevertheless not as good as the Americans. The Americans, they just say, well, we own this and we invented the World Wide Web, which is not true, by the way. It's invented by a Brit, yeah? So we should be more ambitious. We should go. We need actually not 1 or 2 more accelerators. We just need factor 10 on all sides. And we should just show that we are great in creating world-class leading services. And full stop. And I will not accept anything else for my next 2 decades of working.
Okay, that's a good call to action. I've just got one more question, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience, so get your thinking caps on. Should accelerators specialize? We've heard about a fintech accelerator this morning. Blaine, you'll be involved in an accelerator that specializes in social business. They have healthcare. I mean, what are the benefits to specializing and versus having that kind of cross-pollination that you wouldn't otherwise get with having lots of different sorts of companies?
So I think with Bethnal Green Ventures, that was very successful. I think there's a huge appetite for open data and sort of there's a much better municipal infrastructure in the UK than a lot of places in the US. So it's a natural place for that sort of thing to happen. And Paul's been very successful with BGV. I think there's an Internet of Things accelerator, I think, coming up. Yeah. And that's immense, because there's, I mean, watching Matt and Alex on Goodnight Lamp and Little Printer, it's just an immense amount of knowledge that's so hard to acquire. And if they can help each other to build those things, that I can't see anything wrong with that.
Well, I think that would answer my earlier question about mentors. If we're very specific, then actually it becomes a lot easier to go to specific industries and mentor specifically around a subject matter. So.
But then I would argue the opposite, which would be it's better to mix things up, because I think that will drive creativity to mix sectors up, mix categories up, to get people to bounce ideas from completely different sectors, because it will just stimulate more creativity in a way that potentially specific sectors might restrict.
But wouldn't that also depend what phase they're at? So if they're very seed or very early stage, that would make sense. But as they enter growth and they need to really kick it in that particular industry, I would argue that then the more specific ones would make sense.
I still think diversity, but hey.
I think that the verticalization is as much about branding for the accelerator as it is for creating value for the startup. Like, they need to create a differentiated proposition, and there is value in having lots of startups in the same subject, working together and attracting the big names in the industry. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the quality of the entrepreneurs, the quality of the idea, that how real is the problem that they're solving and the market that they're addressing, and their ability to tap that market. But yes, they should verticalize. Why not?
Excellent. Do we have any questions from the audience? I can't really see, I'm slightly dazzled. Oh, there we go. Do we have a microphone? The microphone's not working, whoever's...
Shout, maybe.
Just shout. Oh,
There we go.
I may be the only one who has a slightly uneasy sense of deja vu here, but having been to a lot of these conferences back in 2000 where we had both the independent incubators and the corporate incubators, much of the kind of enthusiasm, the language was the same. And then if you look at what happened, most of the publicly incubated ventures failed not because of money or ideas, but because of a lack of management capability. And most of the corporate incubators failed because they couldn't persuade the account managers inside their organisations to open the door to their corporate clients. And so the ventures had no traction. So the question would be, how do we avoid making those same mistakes? What can we do to improve the quality of management on the one hand and incentivize the ecosystems inside these big corporations to actually want to go out there and incubate these tiny ventures, introduce them to their corporate clients?
Actually, very easy from private. So we run this co-working space called White Billiard not as a business. So we are not taking any percentage. We are not doing anything other than having an open plan office and people can rent desks. And frankly, even if we are renting out a capacity, we not even money. Our business model is the venture fund. We have a $60 million US dollar venture fund early stage, and that's how we plan to make money. Otherwise, I agree with your comments, especially if people try to make a business out of incubation, it's going to be toughy, and you need to be as good as Paul Graham from Y Combinator to actually really add value to the show.
I agree. I think that a lot of these incubators are not going to make it. That's a fact. The way that we run campus as well, similar to White Billiard, maybe apart from the fund element, it's a non-for-profit activity for Google. There's a few
Google is your fund, yeah? Your AdSense.
Google's
is your
my
fund.
backer, you're right. But we provide startups with free workspace, for example, in central working, or a co-working space where they can rent a desk working with our partner Tech Hub, or they can apply to an accelerator program working with Bethnal Green Ventures or Springboard, or they can get picked up by Seed Camp or create a startup with Startup Weekend, etc. It's easier to do when your intentions are when you're not making money out of the accelerator. These accelerators, their business model is based on the fact that you're able to get in early into a deal and then build a lot of value and hopefully exit. But it's true that not a lot of them are going to make it, just because the chances of success of startups are very low in general. So I think that said, it doesn't mean that they don't provide value, and it doesn't mean that they don't help the startups grow. So I think as long as these accelerators get funding, whether it's public or private, etc., and they provide startups with mentorship, support, focus, validation, community, we should take that on face value and help build great companies in Europe. A lot of these companies maybe will succeed despite of the accelerator, not because, but it's something that we should encourage.
I think the other thing is for the accelerator to keep focused on being an accelerator, particularly in our case with an owner like O2 and Telefonica. It could be very easy for them to start getting very corporate with what we do. My experience so far is they've been very, very hands-off, and we are running a very, very separate ship, and that makes it very, very healthy, because we are focused on the accelerator, not on the big corporate that sits behind it.
Although, quickly on that, didn't you initially start out when you were meant to be keeping the startups for just 6 months, and then they've some of them have been extended a bit longer. Can you see that becoming a kind of
Well, we've got that had nothing to do with Telefonica. We've got a slogan which is "The rules are not yet written," which is quite a good excuse for us changing our minds on a fairly frequent basis. But it shows a very non-corporate approach, which is that we can change the rules and we can flex and develop in a way that isn't rigid and fixed, because the startup community isn't a fixed thing. It keeps moving and changing and evolving, and we need to do that as well.
And I would echo that. First of all, great question. I was there Mark 1 and happened to work in an incubator that didn't do so well, that tanked and lost everything. So that was in 2000, so great question. I think the way that people are looking at it this time around is quite different. Certainly in Microsoft's case, it's strategic. We're giving away millions and millions of pounds worth of software. We're not going to make the money back. We know a lot of the startups probably won't make it, but we know there'll be 1 or 2 great ones, or 3 or 4 great ones that are going to bubble out of it and create great stories on the platform. And that's actually worth it. And I think we're looking at it much differently than I would say, back in 2000, which is they were looking at it like a business and wanting to make money out of it. So actually, I think the thinking is quite different. I think the second thing I'll say is people are a lot more practical this time around. I see some nodding going on in the panel. They're a lot more practical. They now know they've got to create a product that's going to drive customers and revenue and growth, and they're a lot more focused this time around than they were the first time. It definitely was a bubble. It was fun, but
and having been one of the .com guys in Germany in the first wave, be assured at that time we've been all totally clueless. So the entrepreneurs have been clueless, the VCs have been clueless, the bankers have been clueless, the journalists, everyone, it was totally clueless. The only thing we knew, we are growing 1% per day, and we somehow try to cope with it. So no wonder that this bubble burst.
Yeah, I think we all learned from the first time around,
I think we've got time for one more question. Are there any questions? Here we go. We've got a mic.
You've talked about diversity in the small practices. I was just wondering how in office structure and company structure you would bring that into a larger scale practice. So how do you bring diversity into a big corporation?
So creating the same kind of melting pot that you get within an accelerator program, but within a larger corporate. Is that your question?
So I can take a shot at that. I think Google, in many ways, it's still a big founder-led startup, and people are encouraged to think entrepreneurially. So whether it's concepts like the 20% projects, where you have your core job, but then you can also apply for a side project that's not part of your core job. That happens regularly. I work with many of them at campus, many people that have taken a 20% project. And hack days, where people are encouraged to solve problems, to solve existing problems in a creative way, and then they get rewarded and they get recognized for that, and it's in the form of a competition and Dragon's Den internally. And finally, I would say that ideas can come from anywhere at Google. I've written 3 patents in the last year, and my job is not to write patents now, but my background is product management, and I've submitted ideas to a forum, and they got picked up and developed further. So I think it's about the culture of the company, really embracing innovation and understanding that ideas can come from anywhere.
What sort of patent?
I think it's also following on from that. I think it's about that open management at a senior level within the corporation. So if your senior leadership team trusts and believes in creativity, then it will flourish. I think if they restrict that, then the business is never going to move forward.
And I would echo that. BizSpark would never have happened if Bill and Steve didn't say yes. It's as simple as that. It comes from the top.
Okay, very quick. Oh, sorry.
That's an incredibly difficult thing to do. I think we might have all three examples of it actually working if you guys are feeling it on stage. I don't know. I certainly haven't seen much of it. So
very quickly, I've got one final question. I want as close to a one-word answer as possible from all of you. What more could the government be doing?
Let's start from the end.
Okay, start with Stefan.
Only one word.
The shortest answer you can give. And we can discuss about this later.
Just continue.
Just continue.
I'm Canadian, so I'm going to say immigration.
Yeah,
immigration,
stole my answer.
Bindi?
No, I would just say focus on allowing great talent into the country.
Continue to cut red tape.
2 words: immigration, education.
Fantastic. Thank you very much to the panel. That's been awesome.